in logbook 6, which is where we are, you are cataloging your scores, and that should help you with your first project. I recommend something, normally I encourage people to do this on paper, but since we're not seeing each other and you're not giving me pieces of paper, might as well use Excel to get organized. I mean, you have your homework, you have your quizzes, you can use a very similar structure to what you have with the sheet 1. Don't forget your homework is everything in the grade book, all of the regular homework quizzes to section 2 through section 17, although you have a bunch of scores that you don't have yet. And then also the logbooks, and then also that info sheet I gave you 10 points for. So all of those go in the homework category. Quizzes, Excel. So just list out your scores. If there's things that are missing, you could put question marks. Eventually, as you start to turn sheet 2 of your project into a working estimation of your final grade, you're going to have to make predictions for yourself. And I would encourage you to do one of two things when you do those kinds of predictions. Let's say that I have these scores. Oops. I got to keep track of what assignment this is. Okay, so that's how many sections there are in the book. If we're done here, let's say these are your scores for 2 through 12. So as you're projecting forward, if you're already in a position where you're starting to finish and make predictions, you can't have these be question marks because Excel won't know what to do with that. So I think if you, well, maybe if you say average, it'll just ignore those. Let me see what happens. Yeah, okay, so it just ignores them, so that's fine. You might also want to look at what happens if these are all 10s, right? Because that's still within your power to get 10s on every homework assignment from here on out. Well, you know, that's like a 1 point average difference for where I am now and where I could be. When you get to a category like projects, that's where the question marks are going to be a problem, because if you do the average of 2 projects that aren't graded yet, it's like, I don't know what to tell you. So this is where you're going to have to make predictions. And I would recommend, you know, you play around with these numbers. What happens if this is a 80 and a 90? What happens if this is 100 and 100? Not just in terms of the average, but in terms of your final grade. And if you look at the extra credit assignment, which I want to talk briefly about, you know, you could get as high as 125 out of 100, which is where the extra credit comes in. So how would that change your grade? You know, what impact would that have? And again, it's very important that in that project you have both the official way and the alternate way, so you can see what impact that has. When you do those made up scores, I would either use a different font or use a background color that indicates, you know, these are numbers that I don't know yet, so these are my predictions. That highlights things that are actual grades and things that are predicted grades. And by the end of the semester, there's only going to be 2 missing grades, and those are going to be your project grades, because I won't grade those until the last weekend. So even if you turn them in early, I won't tell you what the grade is. So that's logbook 6, getting your scores assembled and then just writing a little bit about, you know, what do I need to do in this last 2 weeks. In terms of the extra credit, if you're already thinking that direction, you need to go to the assignments page. I did get the project pages updated with all of the videos that I've made between just in the 2 classes that I've had this summer, talking a little bit about extra things. So these were the ones that I had to start with, and now I've added a couple more. How to scale grades, watching the grades change so that you can see what the whole point of this project is. But this rubric at the end, this is very important as you start thinking about actually finishing the project and whether you're going to write this paper or not. So download this file. This is the full rubric, and this is the Excel only rubric. So your choice at the end is, am I just going to turn in the Excel document with the 3 sheets? This is project 1. If so, the second page is what you would want to look at. And these are how you're going to get your 100 points. Now notice that there's some really big categories here, like the replica of sheet 1 with your own grades. That's a 40-pointer, but it really should be an easy one for me to grade, because if you've built sheet 1 correctly and then you've got your own grades in sheet 2, boom, you're good. And that video about watching grades change, that's how you can test your sheet 2. You can change, because that's how I'm going to test your sheet 2. I'm going to go change a homework score, I'm going to change a test score, and I'm going to see if that final grade changes in response to the changes I'm making in the grade book. There's 10 points here at the end for formatting, so it's just pretty easy points, but sometimes students, I don't think they look carefully at this rubric. So just make sure you go through every row and you think about, okay, well, I got my 3 points here, I got my 5 points here. This is why the project is easier to get 100 points than it is on a test. Right? I think the highest score I had on test 2 was an 87, which is a great score. Not easy to get 100, but it's totally possible to get 100. It happens quite frequently on projects if people just pay attention to every row of this table and think about where their points are going to come from. If you read something and you're like, man, I don't know what that means, what do?
Ask you.
Ask me. Hey, I'm reading the rubric and I see this time analysis table and I don't know what's going on. Now, if you want to write the paper, there's 25 extra credit points. This top rubric is the same as the bottom one on the other page. So that's no different, but you're getting, basically, there's a 5-paragraph essay that you're writing. Don't get confused here. If you've done the class before and you did project 1, it's different than the standard project. I don't want you to explain what you did in Excel. I'm not interested in that. If you did it in Excel, I can see you did it. You don't need to tell me about it. This is what I'm interested in. A lot of times students struggle with analyze and reflect. Analyze is just break it apart. Like the student data provided, we're talking about the fake student. What grade did they get? And why did they get that grade? Right? So you're looking at the grade book, you're looking at your weighted tables, and you're just writing a little paragraph. If you just tell me the student got a C or whatever, I don't know what they got, maybe I'll give you a point for that. I want to analyze and reflect. So student got a C. I think they got a C because they didn't do very well in their exams, or their homework scores were pretty crappy or whatever. And then reflect, maybe I think they could have done this a little differently, and then maybe they would have gotten to a B or whatever. I don't know. There's no predetermined analysis or reflection that's required. I just want you to do both things in order to get your 5 points. And the same goes for each category. This one is probably the longest one in terms of, so you got the most to pay attention to get your 5 points. If you ignore the descriptions here, you could get as little as 2 or 3 extra credit points because you're not doing what I asked you to do. So don't just write a paper and assume that a bunch of words are going to get you a bunch of points. That's not how it works. Like any, assignment, you have to pay attention to the task and keep going back to it and saying to yourself, have I done what I was asked to do? Is this answering the question? Okay, so same thing goes for project 2. And I'm gonna look on Saturday. I'll put an announcement that says this, but I'm gonna put on look on Saturday and see if anybody submitted anything and give you feedback if you have.
I had a
Okay.
question about the logbook 6. You want us to do it on Excel or on a Word document? You rather do it on Excel?
Well, it's a good question. It could be in Excel, it could be a Word document, it could be right in the email. If you're going to do it in a Word document or in the email, then you're eventually going to take everything here, copy it, and then go over to your Word document and paste it in. So I don't know, you knew you could do that, but you can copy and paste from Excel over to Word. And if you want to see all the lines, you click on this box here, and then there's a grid up here. And I go to all borders, and then I've basically made a table in Word. So that's how you would get a table over into Word. And that's actually important. Maybe, can't remember which. Actually, I think it happens in both projects that if you want to do the extra credit, there's a part where you're going to bring a table from Excel over into Word. So that's how you do it. You just highlight what you want, copy, go over to Word, and then paste it in. Okay, good question, Karen. And you can do the same thing right into email. You can just paste it into your email, and then you can write a little paragraph underneath it. Okay. So any other questions in terms of looking backwards and looking forwards?
One
You
more
can-
question about the project.
Yeah.
So I put my grades in for the second column on the project. So do I need, you know how you put the homework and all that, do I need to put my grades at the bottom like I did the pretend student grades at the bottom with the homework, the quiz, or I just add all mine up and just put my average there?
You mean on sheet 2?
On sheet one, on the project one, you know, you had to make two categories. You had to make one for the one that you had already with the grades, and then it's a second category that has homework, quiz, and all that. Is we make up some grades, or we can use our own grades?
Well, some of the words you're using are, I feel, are not quite right. So I want to be very clear. Sheet 1 has a table with the fake students' grades that come from the handout.
Right,
But it also has 2 tables to the side that
right.
give the official grade for that student based on the syllabus, and then the alternate grade for that student. Then there's another sheet, and these have your grades.
Okay,
And it's the same structure. So I would recommend copying and pasting the working sheet 1 over. Don't get started until you finish sheet 1, because if there's problems in sheet 1 that you haven't addressed and then you copy it over, and then you just have twice the work because you got to go fix it in all these other places. So I would recommend, if you still need to go back and forth with me on sheet 1 to get that final green light that says, okay, sheet 1's done, boom, then you go forward.
okay.
So sheet one, we're not using any of our grades. We're just okay. So that's what so we're just using the fake student grades for the 2 charts, the 2 other.
This is all about the fake student.
Okay, that's what I was
see, I didn't know that.
And I would check in with other students, because you should all have the same grades at the end for the fake student, because you all have the same weights, you all have the same scores, so it should all look the same. I'm not saying to copy each other's work, I'm saying check in with each other, because if you get to the same place, that's a good sign, right? If you don't want to check in with me for some reason, I'm happy to give you feedback, but you know, you're welcome to talk to each other. Like, did you end up with this grade? By the way, these are not the right grades to end up with, so because
Okay,
I think these are different numbers or different weights, or I've changed things or whatever.